Today's date is February 7th, 2016, and we're in Darmstadt, Indiana. This is just a little north of Evansville, Indiana. And this gentleman here will introduce himself as Frank Duncan, and we're in his place of business. And we're going to go over a lot of things about him, but on his lap there, this is a little bit what we're going to talk about. That's the USS Pennsylvania there. And the USS Pennsylvania is a sister ship of the USS Arizona.
Right.
And Frank's going to talk about that ship, what it did in World War II. He was on that during World War II, and then he also served during the Korean War. But that is a big battleship, and he'll describe that to us a little bit later. I'm going to show you his pictures when he got out of the service. This is a boot camp up here. Went to Great Lakes Boot Camp, where lots of sailors went from Evansville. And he's just enlisted in the Navy there. And over this other photograph over here, this is when he got out as second-class petty officer, World War II, in 1945, December. Now, Frank, let's start with where were you born, and tell us just where you were born and mother and father, and start with that if you can.
I was born in Evansville, Indiana on the 24th day of February 1924.
So you're 92 right now.
Yeah.
Okay, going on your 93rd year pretty soon.
In a couple of weeks I'll be 92.
92, okay. And you're born in Evansville at a hospital or at home?
Did you what, sir?
Were you born at home or in a hospital?
Oh, I was born at home. I think back that way, very few people went to a hospital to give childbirth.
Okay. And what was your mother's maiden name?
Her name was Beulah Ruff. And she was from Elberfeld, Indiana.
And she married a gentleman named Duncan. Your dad, what's his name?
His name was Baxter Duncan.
What's his middle name?
It B was his middle name.
Baxter
B-double-E.
Okay. And then where did they get married and how did they meet each other?
Well, and I don't know where they met each other. I assume it was in Evansville in 1924. They didn't travel too far from home. And when they got married, I do not know that. But they were married a couple, 3 years, I'm sure of that.
And then what did your dad do for a living and your mother do for a living, and how did you get out here to Armstrong area?
Well, my dad was a furniture factory worker in Evansville.
What was the name of the company?
Globe Bossy World.
One of the biggest furniture companies in the world at that time.
Evansville at that time was known as the furniture capital of the world.
So he worked at Bossy Globe Furniture
on Fulton Avenue.
Uh-huh.
And it burned down somewhere during the war. I forgot about when, but they were still making furniture when it caught fire and burnt.
And did mother work, or is she just a housewife?
She was a housewife.
Uh-huh.
At that time, women hardly worked.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
Had 2 brothers. And, the second child was named Claude. He was a Marine during World War II. Saw lots of action at Guadalcanal, and he got recalled back like I did for the Korean War, but after we got discharged from World War I or World War II, why we went into what they call the reserves, and you got a small payment each month for doing that. I think I got $37 a month, but you stayed at home, done whatever you wished to do. But the Korean War popped up in 1950, and so we had to go back to that for a couple of years, and then my final discharge came after that.
And he came back, went back in the Marines. Is he still living, Claude?
No, he died 4 months ago.
Claude Duncan died 4 months ago.
Yeah, he died this past fall. He was 89 years old when he died.
So he was in World War II with you. You went in the summer of 42. Did he go in about the same time as you?
The same, about a month apart. He lied about his age. He went in when he was 16, and he could have got out, but after he got in, but anyway, he didn't want to do that. So he was fighting Japanese at Guadalcanal before he ever shaved.
Now, where did you sign up at the post office downtown?
Post office downtown.
The old post office on 2nd Street.
That's right.
How long was the line when you signed up?
City block long.
And that was in summer of 42.
Actually, it was in January of 42. But it was July of 42 before I got called, because they had to build barracks and they had to make a lot of preparations. And people enlisted all over the United States like gangbusters.
Nowhere to go, though, so they had to wait till they had a place for them.
Well, they did. No way could they have build enough barracks. Fact is, the barracks that I went through boot training with in Great Lakes, Illinois, before I went to service school, why, we was in the barracks living in it before the concrete floors ever poured. They barely get them up, and here come people.
Where was that barracks at?
I went through the Great Lakes Naval Training School in Great Lakes, Illinois. That's 35 miles north of Chicago.
Still there.
Oh, it was filled up and running over.
Yeah.
And people were, the patriotic people got awful patriotic after the Japanese pulled that sneaking attack on Pearl Harbor. And really the truth be known, the Japanese never intended to invade the United States. They intended to invade and occupy Australia. And they knew that the American Navy would defend Australia when they invaded it. So their purpose was to destroy the American Navy so you couldn't do anything except talk. That won't hurt anybody. And but anyhow, when the American Navy got fired up, we got enough ships, because they either sank or destroyed nearly all of the American Navy. And it was a godsend that they didn't sink the carriers, so we only had 6. And but they were SEAL maneuvers, and they were scheduled to come into Pearl Harbor on Friday before the Sunday that they bombed it. But the water was rough, and they cut their speed down, and so they could handle rough water at a slower speed, and they cut the speed down, which would have brought them into Pearl Harbor on Monday morning, the day after the attack. And when the Japs found out they had no aircraft carriers there, they had reason to be nervous, because there was enough there to come after them. And Jimmy Doodle come after them about 6 months later with 25 B-25s that was taken on the Hornet near Japan. And it was actually didn't do a great lot of damage, but it let them know that we retaliated. And but anyhow,
let me go back to your beginnings, and we're going to get into that. Frank, let's start where you went to school and why you're in Armstrong Township here in Darmstadt here. Why did your dad move out here, and where you went to school, and your brother went to school, and you didn't tell us about your third brother. You got a third brother too?
Do what?
You have another brother besides Claude.
His name was Norman.
And how was he, older or younger?
He was 4 years younger.
Did he go to war?
He went to war too. When he was 17, he joined the Navy Seabees, and he had duty in the Pacific, and then he after the war peace was developed, why he was in the cleanup and what have you of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan.
Now he would have been born in about 27 or 20.
Well,
He's
he was
40.
2 years. He was 2 years younger than Claude, my second brother.
So he couldn't have gotten World War II. He was too much a baby, or did he get into World War II?
He made it. He was actually joined the Marine Corps. I mean the Seabees before the peace was
declared.
He was joined in 45, and about the spring of 45, and declare peace come in August of 45.
But he was a baby. He was 17 too, probably.
Oh, he was 17 years old. He joined the Navy, and he ended up in the Seabees.
Seabees are pretty important. We had Bucyrus here in Evansville, and they made a lot of the bulldozers and other things for the Seabees, and Seabees are very important in construction. They have a museum in Mississippi and out Port Hueneme, but he was very important in construction.
That's right. They repaired runways, what have you, overseas when they get bombed. The Japanese, when they bomb one of our runways, why the bombers wouldn't be out of sight until the Seabees would be out there pulling great, big, huge sheets of sheet iron across the holes that they made in the runway, and they had holes in the sheet iron about 3 or 4 inches in diameter, and they were pulling them over the bomb holes, and the airplane could land or take off in a few minutes.
Is that right? You saw that happen?
Absolutely. On Guam it happened.
Now, we're going to get back to your family before we get into the war. Now so there's 3 boys. Any girls in your family?
No.
No sisters?
No girls.
Okay.
3 boys.
Now tell us what you did as a kid, where you went to school, and how far you went in school. And your brothers went to the same school. Was it? Tell us about Armstrong School, and it's not existing anymore.
Went to Armstrong School too, but Claude he went to Central High School rather than Wrights. I went to Wrights because they taught agriculture, and the Central didn't.
I see.
And I wanted to be a farmer.
And your baby brother, where did he go?
He didn't go at all.
He just went to Armstrong.
He just went to Armstrong School, and he would have went to high school that fall, but he joined the Navy before high school started.
And is he still living, your baby brother?
No, he's been dead about 20 years.
What happened to him?
He died of a lung injury that he got in Japan.
Isn't that terrible, huh?
No doubt the fumes of, I really don't know exactly what happened, and I don't think anybody did. A lot of those people over there was in that cleanup from the atom bomb, and a lot of them got sick and died.
Yeah.
And he didn't die for several years, but he was disabled.
But he was cleaning up after Hiroshima or Nagasaki. He was over in the cleanup crew with the Seabees.
That's
and
right.
Probably exposed to some radiation or some kind, maybe.
There's no doubt they had all kind of problems until they, not knowing what, it was all new territory. And but anyway, he died of lung problems, and he died. I don't know. He's been dead at least more than 20 years.
Now, your dad died during World War II. Were you gone to the war when he died? Your dad died in World War II. What was his name again, your dad?
David.
David Duncan.
David Duncan.
David B. Duncan. David B. Duncan, and he died during World War II.
No, he died afterwards.
After World War II.
Yeah.
But why did he die so young?
Well, I really don't know for sure. was hit by an automobile downtown Evansville. He was jaywalking across the street and got hit by an automobile and got hurt bad. And I don't know, one thing led to another. He never survived in the hospital. TB set in. He was at Beatty Camp Hospital for 2 or 3 years. Yeah. TB set in after he got hurt. Yeah. And at that time, TB was a big killer of people.
And Beatty Camp Hospital on Beatty Camp Road was our TB sanitarium in Evansville for a long time till, I don't know, it closed in the 50s or 60s or 70s. But TB was a big problem in the 40s, 50s. Yeah. Till INH came out in 1953 or 54.
Yeah. My brother, he had TB before he went to grammar school. And he was out there for long enough that he was a year late going to school.
Which brother?
Claude.
Claude, the second one, yes.
Yeah, but he recovered from the TB good enough to be in the World War II in the Philippines and the South Pacific. And Norman, he joined the Seabees, and he was only in there about a year and a half until they cut back. Didn't need near as many, and he went on inactive duty. And but he was done contaminated with the
radiation.
The radiation.
Yeah.
And he never got better, and he finally died.
Now, you were living out here in Armstrong. Your dad must have come out here to be a farmer or something after Bossy Globe burned the factory, or after he left the biggest furniture factory in the world. He left there and came out to this, where we are right now. You grew up in this area a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're back here in the agricultural area. I guess he liked agriculture, your dad?
Oh, yeah.
How many acres did he have out here?
52.
52.
Yeah.
That's pretty big at that time, and so he farmed it all?
It was a family farm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, at that time, the farmers were all family farmers, and they made a living on the farm and sold the surplus. In other words, they were called family farms. Now I guess we call them corporation farms.
Now, when he lived out here, then he died after World War II. So mother sold the farm and moved to 710 2nd Street in Evansville, or 700 block.
That's where we, when the war was over, that's where she lived.
And you grew up there, or lived there a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And she died when she lived there too. Uh-huh. And she'd been dead several years. I forgot exactly how many, but that's 20-some anyhow.
Now, we're going to start here. You were there at Wright's High School and learned a little bit about agriculture, and then all of a sudden the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor on December 7th. So tell us, the next morning, or that morning on Sunday morning, tell us what you felt. You had to hear by radio. Tell what your mother and your dad told you and what your two brothers thought about that. It's a terrible thing to happen in the United States. Can you remember where you were and what happened that day, what you thought was going to happen to the world?
Yeah, it was Sunday afternoon, and I was out to we had a barn, and I was out to the barn doing something. I don't know what I was doing, but doing something. It was a Sunday afternoon, about the middle of the afternoon, and my mother came out and told my father that it's on the radio that the Japanese were bombing Pearl Harbor, and Pearl Harbor didn't mean much to me. I didn't know if it was such a place, and so. Anyway, Dad and I went in the house too, and it was on the radio, and they was talking about it all the time, and so That's about the best I can remember.
But your mother didn't come out to the barn very often, but she came out to the barn then.
She never. It took something like that to get her out of the house.
She wouldn't come out there, but you knew there was a problem. When you heard her talking to your dad, you knew it was serious.
That's right. She said, see, they had the war already going on over in England.
Yeah.
And helping Germany fight Hitler.
Yes.
And everybody was kind of talking about that, but the Japanese program in the middle of the Pacific was a big surprise to a lot of people.
So that happened December 7th of 41, and so you signed up in December of 41, really January 42, and then you went to service in July of 42. So tell us, start at Naval Training Base and then work your way through of everywhere you went, and we'll try to stay chronologically because you were on the USS Pennsylvania, sister ship of the Arizona, and it's very important. We'll get up to that, but we want to know all the things you did before you got to that. That's a big battleship, one of our big battleships, right?
Yes, sir.
Middle battle, okay.
I think I can tell you pretty good.
Okay.
After boot camp was over, which would be about the last of August.
In 42, 1942.
Boot camp is pretty well bounced at that time. Got you kind of halfway acclimated to military life. You got your shots. You took a general aptitude test to find out, it's a written test, find out maybe what you would be apt to be good at or be able to handle without much trouble. Well, I fell into a category of going to service school, they called it. And it lasted 4 months.
How long were you in boot camp? 6 weeks or 8 weeks?
6 weeks.
Okay, and then you go to the service school, okay.
And the service school lasted 20 weeks.
Where was it?
It was at Great Lakes Naval Training Station 2. It was just across the highway. They had service school there. And what it amounted to, it lasted 8 to 10 hours a day, and I fell into a category of a fire control ordnanceman, and we're not talking about fires of incendiary. We're talking about fire control of gunnery, and like guns on the Pennsylvania were 14-inch guns, and it takes about 300 people to shoot those guns at one time. In other words, you could fire them 3 times a minute if you could get everything perfect, but most of the time you'd average maybe 2 rounds a minute. And but nevertheless, they were very effective, and the purpose of that was to sink the ship before he sunk you.
Let me just hone in on that, and you tell us just a little bit about those guns. Now I'm gonna have to zoom in on that just a second here. That is an aerial view of the USS Pennsylvania, and these big guns he's talking about. Frank, can you tell us? Point to the bow of the ship, the front of the ship, and show where one of those guns are. Point to one of those guns there. Yeah, like right there where your index finger is there.
This is the bow here.
Yes.
And the guns, you can see the trunk right here. 3 of them side by side. They stick out of a turret. And then there's a second turret. It's got 3 more guns. And the guns are actually fired from the highest point on the ship, which is 135 feet from the top of the ship to the water. And we elevate the gun to the right elevation, it will shoot accurately at 18 miles.
How many guns did you have on that ship?
At 12.
12. So 3 off the front on the bow and 3 on the. Show us where they all are about.
Well, there was 2 turrets on the bow, and each turret's got 3 gun barrels. at 6, you got the same amount on the after part of the ship. And you have to, when these guns go off all at one time, and the ship has to be, the guns have to be trained off the side of the ship. If the ship's underway, it would wreck the ship if it's fired dead ahead. So you got to shoot them sideways, and the whole ship would scoot in the water 85 feet.
When you shot them off one side, point to which one you're talking about there.
Well,
point
if you shoot them off the right side,
that the starboard side.
12 of them off of the right side.
All 12.
One trigger, the whole ship would go sideways in the ocean 85 feet.
Because of that power. Yes.
Concussion and the recoil.
Did you ever do it that way? Did they do it that way? Or?
Absolutely. You had to do it that way. If you fired dead ahead, you would sink your own ship.
Dead ahead meaning, show me what you mean dead ahead, going
Dead
off
ahead,
the bow of the ship?
if you're going forward,
Yes.
that's dead ahead.
Dead ahead, yes.
You got 4 big propellers driving this huge ship forward.
Yes.
These propellers are 35 feet in diameter, and it propel the ship ahead, which weighs thousands of tons, and the forward motion of the ship, and you fire dead ahead. When they come back, the recoil, it would bust the seams on the ship. The ship would sink. So you put it sideways, and the ship scoots sideways in the water with no forward motion. It just scoots in the water 85 feet.
Now tell us the size of the bullet, and tell us how much gunpowder with one gun. Not all 12, one.
One bullet weighs 1 ton.
One bullet, 1 ton. So that's 2,000 pounds.
2,000 pounds. It takes 400 pounds of powder per gun.
So you load how many bags of powder below the bullet or below the projectile?
You put 4 bags of powder, silk bags,
100 pounds each.
100 pounds each, behind the bullet. The projectile, they call it.
And would the projectile blow up when it hit its target, or it just hit its target?
When they close the breech set on the gun, why there's a primer put in the breech, and it's set off electronically, and they shoot all 12 of them at one time. Boom.
So that's regular gunpowder, 100 pounds. So we got 12 guns, and you got 400 pounds of gunpowder each one. That's 4,800 pounds of gunpowder when they all shoot off at one time. Now, what kind of primer they use? Is that a higher? What kind of primer did they use to get that gunpowder set off?
Well, it was just a regular primer. It looked like a empty shell without like a 45 caliber shell with no lead on the end of it. And when the primer is hit by a firing pin, it sets it on fire.
I see.
And explodes. And then when that explosion sets off the big explosion.
Yeah.
And it's like a detonator.
Now, when you did this, you trained up at Great Lakes. Before we get to this big ship that we're talking about and all these big guns, a battleship, before we get to that, tell us how much they trained you up at Great Lakes on this firing thing.
Well, at Great Lakes, we never fired anything. At Great Lakes, we learned how to make the solution work so that it would compensate for the motion of the ship, the direction of the wind, the temperature.
Yes.
All these things enter into how you aim this gun to hit the target.
Yes.
And now the target we're shooting at is either a target on the land, which would be enemy troops and their barracks and their airstrips and their buildings and their equipment. We're going to destroy all that. And Now then, if you got another ship to shoot at, then you got to compensate for the motion of that ship and the direction of it. And you got to train your gun in such a position that when it lands on the ship, you hit it, not near it, but hit it. So what you do, you fire one bullet at a time, and then you got a spotter, and he watches through the binoculars. And if you can, you got an airplane flying off of your ship. He flies around, and when you fire the bullet, you say salvo, and he's looking for it. When it hits the water, he says splash, and so then he tells you how far you missed it. So you correct the error and fire again one time. Now we've wasted about 4 or 5 minutes getting this far along. And then when you get near the target, he says commence fire. Then you fire 12 at a time. And the purpose is to have a few of them, maybe half, fall short of the target. The others go over the target. And they hit in the water at the same time. And then they move the water so fiercely that it crushes the side of the ship. And if you bust the seams on the ship, they fill full of water and you sink instantly. I say instantly. We're 2 or 3 hours you're underwater forever, and that's how it's supposed to work. Well, you got to do all this correction before you do it. Now, if you're going to bombard enemy troops on the beach, then you got to have a different program. You got a shore fire controlman, and he tells you how far you're missing, and you correct the miss by changing the position of the gun and the time it goes off. So that's what the fire controlman does. You electronically aim the gun, and in this case, we say guns, you're shooting one to feel your way in, and then when you get comfortable with the solution, then you fire them all. And
now, where did you stand, or did you watch the binoculars, or what part did you sit on?
No, you were inside the ship in what they call the plotting room, and all this is done physically on the drawing board, and now it's done by the computers.
Yeah.
And but anyway, that's
you
what
show us where this plotting room is on this ship here. Here's a gun. There's a gun. There's a gun. There's there's a big turret, but where's the plotting room in here?
The plotting room is 45 feet under the water at the bottom of the ship.
On the bottom of the ship, under the guns, or right in the center of the ship?
No, in the center of the ship. And the plotting room is
right under here. Yes.
It's down under the water, 45 feet.
I see.
And
you're going by radio. Somebody's telling you radio.
Oh, yeah, we go by. We had what we call sound power systems, and for telephones, that's how we communicated.
By telephones down there.
See, the reason the plotting room is in the middle of the ship on the bottom, it's easier to the roll and the pitch of the ship is more stable.
In the center as opposed to the bow and the stern.
That's right. And if it's on a bow, you're going up in the air 45 feet, you're coming down. But it pivots on the bottom of the ship, in the middle, and then your pivot's a lot smaller.
So you were in the center of the ship most of the time. Now, your hearing's pretty good. You're 92 and you can hear, so you weren't by those guns as much. And so did you wear earmuffs, and you can hear me today, which most people that were just gunners don't hear anything.
No, we didn't hear anything. We had what they call sound power phones, and there's a headset, and it was on your head, and you only thing you heard is the other person talking, or you heard the pilot talking, this, that, and the other, and if you folks, one of those, the sound power was the voice of the talking made the power.
That was an echo because then if your electricity went out, you could still communicate.
That's right.
If you had a bad fire or bad anything.
You weren't plugged in to nothing.
It was like bouncing off that tube that went through, and so you were talking to the gunners, and the captain of the ship was talking to you, and you were talking, and they was talking to the airplane, or whoever your spy was up on the top of the...
Now, whoever the enemy could not hear you talk unless he had a receiver.
Yes.
Then he could, but he didn't have a receiver. Only the people that had the receiver, and
when that big gun went off, when all those 12 went off, tell me what that ship felt like, because you're right in the center of that ship. What did you have to hold still because it was going to bounce you?
You didn't feel much of anything.
But it went 85 feet, the ship.
Well, the ship moves for 85 feet, but you're inside of it. You go with it.
You don't notice it. You didn't notice it pulling you.
It vibrates, it shakes, and it. You know that there's stuff going on. But see, you're down into the ship about 40 feet down, and then the ship don't roll as much at the end if it was up here.
Yes.
It's like a straight line, see?
Yes.
And if you now the people in the gun turrets, they can hear them and feel them.
Yes.
And it takes about 250 people to fire one of those gun turrets.
Tell us what all those people do. They tell a few things they do. I mean, that's a lot of men to run one of those guns. One turret had 3 guns. One turret had 3 guns. Yeah. 250 men, so that's per one gun about 75 people.
It takes that's how many people it takes.
Yeah.
Well, you got to get the bullet out of the magazine to the gun. That takes a bunch of people. You do this by hand, and chain blocks, and transfer cables. You don't do it with electricity, because if you lose your power, you're done. And these bullets weigh a ton apiece, and you don't pick them up like a dozen eggs.
And so the bullet was hard to transfer. It either used pulleys and chains and human beings to carry that to the chamber.
You got elevators that take it up 5 decks
from down lower. The bullets are all hid down by where you are down lower.
And they got to come up 5 decks into the barbette, they call it, of the turret.
Yes.
And it takes people to do that. So to run that the Pennsylvania, our full crew was 3,200 people.
Wow.
It was on that ship.
Wow.
And of course that includes the people that run the ship. It takes about 1,500 people to protect the ship. They're what they call ordnance people. And the balance of the people that's on there are ship's company. And they run the ship. They do everything from cook meals to wash clothes. And they're
the captain. And they're the captain of the ship too.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then the engineers they run the engines in the engine room.
You had 3 propellers on the back of there.
You got water tenders.
Yes.
That take salt water and make fresh water out of it. And you got to make enough fresh water for 3,200 people every day. And I forgot exactly how many gallons of water it takes per person, but it's several.
And they had a desalinator.
But see, the ordnance people are they call them guns, a nickname. And you got a few advantages. One of them is you don't stand the chow line to eat when you're in conditions where you could have to shoot any time.
Yes.
And that, of course, when you're in peaceful waters, why, all you do is maintain your gun.
Yes.
And your gun sights and your fire control equipment. But when you're in combat, why, you're testing it.
Yes.
And you better have it working, or you're liable not to end up without surviving.
Now, you must have tested out pretty well when you were at boot camp, because you must have done pretty well in tests, because in charge of that was a pretty important job you had.
Oh yeah, well, there's a lot of important jobs. It just depends on what comes up with what. And if after you get to go to school, if you don't pass, then you get into something else. And but if you pass, well, you'll stay in fire control, or you'll stay in engineering or whatever. It's quite a mechanism to run a Navy, or run an Army, or run an Air Force.
Now tell us about the engine. You said there's 4 props, and how big were the props, and how big were the engines on this ship? And how fast did this ship go?
Okay, the Pennsylvania had 4 propellers, and they were about 35 feet in diameter, and they were made out of solid brass, and at full speed, the Pennsylvania could do 18 knots and hold it for 18 knot is just a little bit more than a mile, but we could hold a maximum speed for maybe 8 or 9 hours, and then we have to slack up a little bit because our bearings and our what have you get hot. If you get hot enough, you burn them up. You can't do that.
Why was a brass prop? Why'd they have a brass prop?
Cruising speed is 15 knots.
Yes.
You could run 15 knots indefinitely. In fact, it was all during World War II in the Pacific. We traveled 125,000 miles chasing around after Japanese ships.
What speed usually? 15 or less?
If we were cruising, why we'd just go 15 knots. But if a submarine happened to give us a signal and a Japanese ship had been sighted and fairly close to you, then you'd head for that area, and you'd determine whether you wanted to get there in the daylight or to the dark. And we had radar to shoot with at night, and again, it depends on what kind of ship the Jap ship was, and what its course was, and sometimes they'd be damaged, and they was only doing about 5 knots is all they could do, and so we could overcome them in a hurry. Every time we went 15 miles, why we'd gain something like 10, and.
But if you think of other things in the Navy, like the LST, went 8 miles an hour, 8 knots or so on an average. If you had to go with those types of ships, you had to go slower. So a lot of times you didn't go with supply ships or LSTs. You were just attack ships. What else was in your flotilla? What other ships were with you?
Well, with us?
Yes.
Well, it depends on the operation that we was on.
Yes.
If we were on an invasion operation, we had aircraft carriers, we had destroyers, and we had repair ships, and we had tanker ships or fuel ships, and they wouldn't all be together, but they'd be a few miles apart, maybe a day apart. Mm-hmm. And when we needed fuel, well, we'd fuel at night. And but I never did participate in that business. I was always participate in the maintenance and the operation of the guns and this equipment.
Now, let's go back. We advanced here about some of the actions in the Pacific, but you got out of boot camp, and then you went to the training school at Great Lakes across the highway. So we're late 42. Then you took off from there about September, October, and went somewhere. Give me a date about when you left there.
I went to California and got aboard the USS Pennsylvania.
What date in California?
San Francisco.
What date about? What date?
I went aboard the Pennsylvania on the first week in September, about the 4th or 5th, not September, February.
Of 43.
Of 43.
Yeah. Okay.
43.
Now let's back up. You're on the Pennsylvania. Tell us about the sister ship, the Arizona, and tell us how they make 2 ships together. Tell us how many blueprints, how much they weigh just to make a ship, and tell us a little bit the size of this ship. You said a little bit again, and the width of the ship.
The Pennsylvania was built toward the end of World War I. It had been updated and changed from burning coal to burning oil, from going slow to going faster, and all this, that, and the other. And it was at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese bombed it, and along with other ships. But it happened to be in the dry dock, getting its bottom scraped, and that's scraping the barnacles off the bottom of the ship. And
this is a picture of it right here. You point the guns out on that. This is a picture. This is the day after Pearl Harbor now. Right here is a picture of it from a book. But you described that a little bit to us there, Frank. That's a picture of dry dock. This is probably December 8th, the day after the bombing.
It is.
Or the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Now point to, there's a boat in front, or a ship in front of that. Point to the ship in front and tell them what that ship is.
It was 2 destroyers in the dry dock. One of them was named Shoal, and one of them was named Downs.
Right in front of that ship.
They were right here, and the Japanese bombed. They were destroyers, and they literally blew them to pieces.
And right in front of your ship.
Right here.
Yes.
And now this is the beginning of the Pennsylvania here, and it was back here. And that's the superstructure of the Pennsylvania right here. And they...
Show us the guns. Show us the guns on the Pennsylvania, just so people can see. I've got to zoom in on that. Show us the guns on the Pennsylvania there, right? Where are the guns?
The forward guns are here, and the after guns are back here, and back in the debris.
Yes.
And this is the superstructure in the middle, and it's from the bottom of the ship to the top. It's about 100 feet, and they literally wrecked it, but they cleaned it all up and got her back into action. And I went aboard in February of 1943.
When it was over in San Francisco. But right here, this is Battleship Row. Right, the Battleship Row. Point to where Battleship Row, where there were 8 battleships. This one was in dry dock, the Pennsylvania dry dock. But is it?
The Battleship Row is right along here. You can see a little water here, and the ships, and the Arizona was sitting back over here when it got bombed and blew to bits.
How far was the Arizona from your ship, the Pennsylvania, when it got bombed?
Oh, I'd say 3 city blocks.
3 city blocks away. Yeah. And there were 8 battleships right in a row there, and yours is in dry dock with no bombs on it, no armament. There was nothing.
When you go in dry dock, they take all the ordnance off.
Tell me how much ordnance was on there. How many truckloads was that of ordnance that they took off that ship?
When we got a full complement of ordnance on, it took 42 semi-loads to fill us up.
42 semis full of gunpowder and shells. 42 semi-trailers.
That's right. And that would make each semi hold about 20 ton.
That's just unbelievable. How much that one ship had? That's just one ship.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you got to have that much if you're gonna shoot them all up. We shoot them all up. Sometimes run out of ammunition. Then the ammunition ship had to bring its ship, a whole ship, not fuel, but we'd have to take on fuel too. We didn't come back to get shells. They brought the fuel to us on tankers, and they brought the ammunition to us on ammunition ships, and we transferred it at sea. And
with pulleys, or had big pulleys, or how did you transfer all those big that gunpowder and all that those shells over?
With big booms.
Big booms.
And you pick them up and just swing them one ship to another. You got to have calm water, and then you're going along about 3 or 4 miles an hour, and you tie the ships together, anchor them together, and you're both going the same speed.
How far apart are the ships?
They virtually touch each other. You got big fenders you hang over the side, and they're made out of most of them are made out of wood and big heavy rope. They call them fenders. But if you got everything going right, you're about 50 feet apart, and one ship, they're both going the same speed. Then they got cables holding them together, and then they offset the rudder just a little bit, and then they want to pull apart, but the cables keep them from pulling apart.
Yeah.
And it works real good. We could take fuel on one side, ammunition on the other side, groceries after you get the oil pumped aboard, a supply ship with fresh food and frozen food and canned food, and it took.
How often did you get supplies?
But, well, depends on supplies. About every week.
More, you filled the tanks up. You didn't want to be empty tanks in case you went to war.
You couldn't possibly. We carried enough fuel for 90 days, but we had to refuel our own destroyers that went with us, and they couldn't carry only about enough fuel to go about a week.
I see.
It depends on the weather and how fast you got to go. Because the faster you go, the more fuel you're going to burn. And if you're chasing after an enemy, why, you go flank speed. That's as fast as you'll go. Our old captain used to say, give her 4 bells and a jingle. The bells is full speed, and the jingle is if you got any extra. But that's the man in charge talking to the man in charge in the engine room.
Yeah.
Because he depends on how fast you want to go, and it depends on what you're going after. And if they find out we got a ship ahead and we're going to try to catch him and sink him today, why, then we give her all we got. Now, it's a big, complicated program, I'm telling you.
You understood more about life. You started to understand a lot about life when you got in the Navy, how big a company it was, how big that ocean was, and how big a job it is to run a ship. But as a little kid coming out of Armstrong School and Wright's High School, you saw the world so differently when you came back in 45. Oh. You had seen, you grew up probably 10 years in 3 years.
Yeah, I imagine. And sometimes you grew up overnight per there.
Yes. And
you can see all the mechanism that has to take place, and it's a whole lot better to do the sinking than it is to get sunk. And when you have to pick up survivors, that some of them are dead and some of them are alive, why, and some of them are about dead, that ain't no good either. But somebody has to do it.
How much fear did you have when you went to war, when you saw all those injuries and deaths and things like that? How much did that bother you in the fear factor?
Well, I'll tell you what. After a while of military service and doing wartime, they keep you so damn busy and so well occupied, you ain't got time to worry about nothing. You know, that's all there is to it. Because what are you going to worry about? You don't get any mail for 3 or 4 months at a time.
Yeah.
And you don't get anything, no telephone and no nothing. And they keep you so damn busy, you hardly know what day of the week it is. And
so you don't have enough time to think, to get lonely or to get scared. You're too busy. They keep you busy.
Absolutely not. There's something going on concerning your job on the ship. You don't have much. Now, every once in a while, somebody will have a problem. Every ship has got a chaplain, you know, and a chaplain in civilian life is a preacher, a minister, you know, but they get drafted too.
Yes.
And every unit has got. In fact, they have church. Their services, they call it. Like on the Pennsylvania, we had a Jewish rabbi, we had a priest for the Catholics, and we had a preacher for the Protestants.
Yes.
And
was the church very busy, or did anybody go to church on the ship?
Oh yeah.
Pretty full.
Oh yeah. When the times get tough, you'd be surprised. Everybody gets religion. And you know, when you went underwent a Japanese air attack like this afternoon, and 2 or 3 ships get sunk with kamikazes, and you see them sinking over there, and then 2 or 3, 4 kamikazes come after you, and you was able to shoot them down before they hit you, and this, that, and the other. But anyway, it passed the word on the PA system after things cooled down. Catholic Mass is now being held on the quarterdeck. That'd be what they'd say. Well, I see a lot of guys who wasn't Catholics go back there to that Mass. And in fact, I was guilty of doing it myself.
Yeah.
And I was a Protestant, so the Catholic, maybe the Catholic priest, he had things all arranged. He'd have his services, what have you. But it was good. They done the best they could with the tools they had to work with.
But attendance went way up when there was a lot of war. When it was stressful,
yeah.
The attendance at the churches went up a lot, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I noticed that when I was in the Persian Gulf War. A lot of the church was full. As soon as we were going to war, and it emptied out pretty quick after the war was over. You know.
So the war sometimes does a little bit of good, but most of it's not very aggressive.
Yeah.
When they dropped that atom bomb, why, that saved a lot of American lives, because now we were training on invading Japan in August of '45 when they dropped that bomb.
What were you training? Going out in the Japanese Sea and Atlantic? What were you practicing?
The training was occupying and invading and occupying the Japanese homeland.
Which part were you going to invade? The lower island or upper island?
We were going to, our unit was going to invade the southernmost island
Kyushu.
of Japan.
Yeah, that's Kyushu.
I don't know the name now, but I know it was the southernmost island, and that's the island that they had the most troops on.
When were you going to invade? In August or September?
We were going to, the date was November the 11th.
Of 1945.
That's right. That was the invasion date.
Yes.
And we didn't know exactly when the date was, but we knew it was. Of course, they're always subject to change. On account of the weather can change it. They're not going to invade in heavy seas.
Yeah.
You're not going to invade in the weather's bad. But after it's set, it takes a lot to change it. Like when they invaded Europe, they've been a lot better off if they'd called it off, but Eisenhower chose not to do it. And there's a lot of people got drowned, or got drowned, I guess is the proper word. They never got to the beach because the water was too rough. But in the South Pacific, we never did have to call one off, because the South Pacific has got certain times of the year they have rough water, but most of it is calm as it can be. But in Japan, it was set for early part of November, I know that.
You were pretty scared. You thought you were going in.
No, I didn't get scared.
You weren't getting scared.
No, I didn't get scared.
Now let's get back to...
I got all that on my system, get all that scared stuff out of you, when you go into boot camp. and they tell you, you a man or a mouse. And so...
they get you strong then.
Well, see, a person when he's 18, 20 years old, a lot of them, you're indestructible. I was one of them, Yeah. And I used to tell them on the ship, I never had to eat it, but the rougher it gets, the better I like it. Bring them on. and so, but anyway, we were Japan would have been tough if we had to have invaded it, because the atom bomb solved that problem.
Yeah.
And so it's a good thing that Harry Truman let them drop it. Some of the politicians we got today, I don't think they want them to drop it.
Okay, let's go back to when you got on the Pennsylvania. Let's start with the Pennsylvania. When you got on it in San Francisco, how'd you get to San Francisco? By train, and then you got on where, at Treasure Island, or where did you get on the ship?
Where exactly what happened? You go from Great Lakes, Illinois. We went on a troop ship or a troop train, and it took us 4 days to get there. And they, of course, there were soldiers on there, there were sailors down there. They was all going to San Francisco. And it was no civilian train. It was a troop train.
Did you just sit, or you get a stand, or what did you stand? Did they have chairs in a train for you?
No. They had regular passenger train coaches.
Yes.
Okay. They had sleepers to sleep in. That actually had a bunk 4 high.
So Pullman cars type thing. You got to sleep on the way on those 4
yeah,
days.
You had a bunk.
And did you eat okay? They had a place to eat and everything?
Well, they had a kitchen and the diners on the train.
Nobody else but civilian, or but military. They didn't have any civilians on there?
No, none. This
no lady waitresses?
Strictly a military troop train.
Who was a waitress?
Marines. There was no civilians on there at all.
I see.
The military took over.
Did you have to stop a lot on the way to San Francisco, and they go about 30 miles an hour?
No, we didn't have to stop a whole lot. We had to get water.
Yes.
And I think it took us 5 days.
Yes.
And to get there, but they run all night. But we had to stop them steam engines. They had to have water, and then every now and then. The ambulance would meet the ship, somebody gets sick.
Yeah. And
they had a couple, 3 doctors, military doctors on the ship.
You mean on the train?
On the train.
Yeah.
And if somebody, the main thing that they was watching for is they had flu in them days like they have flu now. And it spread like wildfire if it gets started. And if a couple of people got sick, they stopped the trains the next city and took them all.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we got to San Francisco. We went to Treasure Island. That was a receiving ship for the Navy. And we was there for just 2, 3, 4 days. And the ship was we knew where we was going, but it was at San Francisco Navy shipyard. And when the time comes right, why, they put us on a Navy bus and took our luggage and our self aboard the ship, and we went aboard there in February, and then about the 1st of May we tied up to the dock all that time, and of course you got the duty on the ship. And
so you stayed in San Francisco Bay from February 43 to May of 43. Stayed. You never went out to sea during that 2 months.
Just on over to. We went out, we did go to sea a few times. Now, in 1943, in May, we made our first invasion against the Japanese.
Where was that? Tell us about that.
It was on Mother's Day of 1943. And it was at Attu in the Aleutian Islands. It's only about 60 miles or so from Russia, on the end of the Aleutian chain from Alaska. But anyway, we went aboard the Pennsylvania, and we went out on what they call shakedown cruises. It had a lot of work done on the ship, And
how many shakedown cruises did you have? 1 or 2 of them?
Dozen.
And that's right out San Francisco Bay, and then
You get to right out to San Francisco Bay. It take about an hour. And
you learn what to do. Then you try to, just make sure everything was working.
Yeah, you run the ship for so many hours at flank speed. It's wide open, and then we went down to a place called Saipan Islands, and we fired the guns on the Navy's got an island down there that nobody lives on, and it belongs to the military, and they use it for a bombing range and shelling range.
So you've got to practice there. That's the first time you really got to practice a lot.
That's right.
When you went to San Clemente, and then you would practice all the aiming and everything.
Yeah, they got targets over there, and you shoot at the targets, but you don't hit the target. You offset it on purpose. If you miss it so many yards, that's how you want to do it, because you got to save it for the next guy.
Yes.
But anyway, on Mother's Day of 1943.
How long did it take you to get up to Attu?
About 10 days.
From San Francisco. And you went with just by yourself or some other ships?
No, we had two other battleships.
What were the name of it?
The Mississippi and the Idaho.
What class of battleships are those?
They were the class of the Mississippi. They were the same class.
They weren't the new modern one, though. The more modern ones were made right at World War II. These were World War I, old World War I ones.
That's exactly right.
And the new ones came out in World War II, which were different than these.
A whole lot different. Whole lot different.
But these did the job. You had big guns on them, 14, 16-inch guns.
They done their job.
The Mississippi and the Idaho were the same as the Pennsylvania. They were about the same.
The same thing.
And then they had the big guns, 14, 16-inch. They all had 12 guns each. So you had 36 guns going up to Attu.
That's right.
No other ships with you? They didn't have anything else with you?
No. Had a couple destroyers went with us.
To protect you?
To protect us from submarines.
What's the name of the destroyers? Do you remember the names of the destroyers?
Yeah, I think I can.
And how'd they protect against submarines? They had bigger guns. They didn't have bigger guns, but they could shoot the depth charges better and had a thicker hull.
They actually got 5-inch guns. Mm-hmm. A bullet weighs 38 pounds, and they could shoot main thing shoot at airplanes with. And but the depth charges for submarines is what they are for. And we did have a subcontract up there. With a Japanese submarine, and the destroyers destroyed it, and they depth charged it. They come to the top and they blowed it to hell.
You could see that. You saw that yourself?
Absolutely.
So you saw them when that destroyer hit that sub on the way to Attu, or when you're up there, was the sub on top of the water and the destroyer hit it? Or
he was submerged.
And then he floated up.
Let me tell you what happened. The submarine is submerged, and destroyer has a contact.
Contact meaning radar, or he had sonar?
Sonar.
Yeah.
It's like radar underwater.
Yeah.
And he has so they drop a few depth charges, and not much luck. Well, the next day, wasn't no debris. If you get a hit, there'll be oil and trash and everything come up, but somehow they lost contact. And so the next day now, they didn't have, so far, no subcontact. Well, the invasion's underway, and it's foggy, and it's cold, and it's May, but it's still cold up the Aleutian Islands. And but anyhow, we got a submarine contact. So we got a salty old captain. So he comes, turns the ship about, and goes right at the contact. If he's not too deep, we'll crash into him. We'll ram him, they call it. We had a rammer bow on the Pennsylvania, and it was made in such a way, if you rammed another ship, you'd sink it. But we didn't have any contact. Well, about the middle of the afternoon, we had a contact. There's a torpedo in the water, and the torpedo's moving, and they're coming right after us. And so they passed the word over the ship, stand by for a ram. In other words, if you're in a position where you could get hurt, you get yourself out of that position. In other words, get hold of something. But the ram didn't come about. Well, the submarine fired the torpedo but the torpedo went under us.
Oh, how?
He didn't have his depth set right.
Wow, you were lucky. Did anybody see it come by you?
Oh, hell yes, you could see the wake in the water.
Did you see it?
I never saw it because I was below in the plotting room. I couldn't even see the daylight.
That scared the heck out of a lot of people, though.
A lot of people did. It would scare me none. And
but it went under you. Your depth was how much in the water? You're 30 feet in the water, are you not?
Yeah,
your draft to 30 feet or 25 feet. How's your draft?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. The Pennsylvania normally drew 32 feet of water. 32 feet, fully loaded. Well, the Navy put out a bunch of propaganda, and they said after the overhaul, the Pennsylvania will now draw 40 feet of water. You know, well, it only drew 32 feet. So the Japanese captain, he had the information that the Pennsylvania drawed 40 feet of water. So he had his torpedo set to hit something at like 45 feet.
Did it explode under there? It didn't explode at all.
It went under us.
It went under you.
It went under us. You know, in other words, he had his submarine, his shell, his torpedo was set to go off at about 40 feet. Well, but we didn't draw 40 feet. He missed us by 8 feet. Well, if he'd had the right information, he might have hit us.
Yes.
Well, anyway, he fired all his torpedoes. I forgot how many it was. 12, I think, and never got a hit.
12 torpedoes?
That's how many he fired, one at a time.
And they all at you or at the other ships? Just at you or the other two ships too?
Do what?
When he showed it did he send the torpedoes just to the Pennsylvania or to the Idaho and the Mississippi?
He never attacked them.
Just you?
Yeah, just us.
And not the destroyers?
They were in a different location.
I see.
You know, on the operation.
Wasn't a destroyer around there to help you?
No, they stayed on their own sector. You know,
they were up close to the Attu Island shooting the guns.
Well, they was in on the same operation.
Yeah,
but they was on a different side.
Yeah,
you know, and there was about 145,000 soldiers on that island, Japanese soldiers.
Wow.
They thought. Well, they were there, I think, and then the transports that was hauling the soldiers was unloading in the invasion. See, and we were protecting it. And then when they needed fire or airplane protection or whatever, why we had an aircraft carrier with us, they called for help. But anyway, this Japanese submarine fired these torpedoes, and he got every one he fired was a miss. Never got a hit.
Did all of them go under you, or a lot of them just missed? But a couple went under you. Out of 12, not all 12 went under you.
2 or 3 of them went under us because the captain would turn the ship, and as soon as you see the wake, he would turn the ship and go parallel with it. And the sub's going, the torpedo's going this way, and we turn and go that way. Call it zigzag.
Yes.
And
boy, but it scared a lot of those guys up high when they saw that. Even though you were down below, you didn't know what was going on. Totally.
You didn't even know. You didn't have any idea what was going on.
But they told you to chow hall, and they were scared after they saw that. They saw those.
You knew what was going on because you had flank speed, and they had emergency turns. See it?
And that's how much degree is that? What's an emergency turn? What degree?
35.
That's about as much as you could do.
You do more than that, you're going to tear something up.
Uh-huh.
And see, you'd have, but see, the Jap had the wrong information. You know, this propaganda they put out worked.
But that's early in the war. They probably caught on later.
Oh yeah. That guy didn't tell them anything because when the submarine come up the top. Why, it was foggy, so damn foggy, you couldn't see beans, you know, and one of the destroyers rammed the Japanese submarine, not even knowing it was a submarine there. He just crashed into the submarine.
Did it tear it apart? Did it sink?
Pretty near, it wrapped it around the submarine, pretty near, wrapped around the destroyer, you know. Then they backed out of it, and then.
Did the destroyer sink then? Did it have? It couldn't ram a ship. Did it put a hole in the destroyer?
It damaged it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything serious that they couldn't live with.
And then the Japanese sunk, or did they go take some of their stuff off the submarine? Because if you get stuff off the submarine, it's valuable for
they
spying.
The submarine never come to the top.
It didn't. Yeah.
He was pretty quick. There's a lot of oil in the water, and then you see apple boxes, and you have furniture, bedding, and everything comes out of the submarine, out of the hole that they cut into it, and it comes to the top.
You didn't see any survivors? No survivors?
They all committed hara-kiri.
You think they did?
Oh, I guess they did. They didn't come to the top.
Wow, and that thing hit that sub, and they didn't even really know it. They didn't know what they were doing. They just sort of by mistake. Nobody got them with a depth charge.
No.
But you're lucky you survived that,
We didn't
Frank.
even know where they were.
Yeah.
And they anyway, it was time for them to go. But anyhow, but our attack up there was done on Mother's Day, you know.
So that's May 1st of 43?
The first
Sunday of May.
Sunday of May.
Yeah.
And that was, I know it was on Mother's Day, you know, and I never forgot it. On account of, Mother's Day was always kind of a big day around our house with kids growing up.
Now, when you were at that Attu island, 145,000 Japanese troops on that island.
They killed every one of them.
How did they kill them? Did they shoot your guns and the other two?
We landed two transport loaded with American soldiers.
But did your big guns, the 16 inchers?
They never needed the big guns because it was so damn foggy. You couldn't do much good. We used our 5-inch 38s and on them, but it was so foggy, and the Japanese got themselves in a big mess, and they couldn't get themselves out, and a great lot of them committed hara-kiri.
But then your three big battleships up there hardly shot at all. Why would you leave those American troops on the island? How did they beat the other people? There weren't tanks and other things.
See, they had their own artillery.
Yes.
And it was so foggy we couldn't do a whole lot, but we got them there, and then but the Japanese, they all retreated to one area of the island for some reason or other, and anyhow the American Air Force come from Alaska, which is only 4 or 5 hours away, and they just bombed them unmercifully day and night, and at night they drop star shells on them, and they illuminate the ground pretty good, and they just, and the ones they didn't kill, they committed hara-kiri. There was no survivors.
That's pretty scary, though. If they're at the Attu Island, that's pretty close to the United States, and pretty scary that they were that close. This is May of 43.
Yeah,
they were close, and is that near Adak, Alaska, or how far is that from Adak, or how far from Anchorage?
Well, about Adak, maybe half a day.
Yes.
A ship, you know. See, in Kiska was another island. The Japs had a little sub base on there, but that was just a big propaganda show. Japs never intended to go to Alaska either, but they wanted to draw us off of the South Pacific, and we'd fight up there, and they wanted to go to Australia.
Yes.
And so that deal up there, the Americans then built that Alkane Highway from Seattle, Washington to Anchorage, Alaska, and thinking they might have to fight up there, you know, but it didn't take them long in the frozen weather to push a road through the woods going through Canada.
When did they build that highway? In World War II?
Yeah.
did they just to get stuff up there? Is that what they did?
They built that for protection for Alaska.
And when they built that, 1942?
1942 and 43.
Uh-huh.
See, and the Japs, they didn't intend. See, after the war is over, you get all capture and get all of their literature.
Yes.
And they definitely didn't intend to do anything except distract the position of the American forces out of the South Pacific, where they was on their. They wanted to go hopscotch down to
Australia.
Australia,
Yes.
and so they
Well,
almost got there.
That's a smart move. They had a lot of natural resources in Australia, a lot of land. The size of Japan is the size of Montana, where Australia is a lot of what they needed, probably because they were landlocked. They didn't have.
I've been told, and I'm sure it's true, that half of Australia has never had a white man there. It's some natives,
Aborigines,
on half of it, and the high elevations. But Australia is a huge continent that's never been seen very much by white people. Yeah. So the Japs say if they could have got away with that trick of doing away with the Australian people, and literally that's what they would have done, because the island, the Japs, they went after China a few times. They went after North Korea once, and a lot of the people that they captured in North Korea and South Korea, and they made slaves out of them. And they were building those Air Force bases going to Australia on those islands in the Pacific.
Yes.
And a lot and those slaves that they took from Korea, they never got back to Korea. They died down wherever they were working, and the Japs worked them to death.
Now tell us about your second battle. We've had Attu now. Attu, is that pronounced correct?
Yeah.
Attu. You had that battle. That's Mother's Day of 43. Tell us then where you went, and try to stay sequential in this here,
Frank.
Frank.
Where we went. We went from Attu to Pearl Harbor. And then we operated out of Pearl Harbor. And the first operation out of Pearl Harbor against the Japanese was on the an island in the Gilbert Islands. It's called Macon Island. And we, in November of that same year, we invaded Macon Island and took it in about 2 or 3 weeks. And then the next island we looked at was in was an island in the Macon group called Tarawa, and we took that in a week or 10 days.
Tarawa.
Tarawa.
They have a the Navy right now. I think it's still commissioned. It's a USS Tarawa. It's still a ship. It's a LPH, and they had about, I think, 8 or 10 of them. In the Persian Gulf War, they had a USS Tarawa named after this island in the Pacific Ocean, and it's an LPH, a pretty big ship, about 800 feet long, and it's got helicopters that land on it, and so it's in the amphibious group, but they named it after this island you're talking about, Tarawa.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
And tell us about the first island. Was not a bad one. Did you shoot the guns much on the first island?
Both of them. We probably fired 1,000 rounds or so on each one of them.
Were the Japanese on? What's the first island we talked about?
First one was Macon Island.
And how
the Japs didn't have very good defense there, and they took the island in about 3 or 4 days.
Did you? And how many battleships in that one? 2 or 3 of you, or a bunch of you?
The same ships. The Mississippi and the Idaho.
And then you just kept shooting, and then you stopped, and then you put the men on the island after you neutralized them with the big bullets.
The transports carried the troops. I think they had about 45,000 Americans, something like that.
But you hit them with the big guns for 3 days before you put the troops on land. And then the troops didn't get beat very bad on that first island, Makawa. What's the name? The first island.
Was Macon.
Macon. And so the troops, we didn't lose many troops there?
No, they didn't have. The big problem with Tarawa was this.
That's the second one. Now, Tarawa is the second island in the Gilbert Islands.
Yeah, it's maybe 100 miles away from Macon.
Macon, and that's towards the west, but you're going west towards Japan.
That's right.
And what happened at Tarawa?
Okay, at Tarawa, well, the Japanese, on high tide, why, they made, put huge concrete blocks that they poured in the bottom of the ocean, near the beach, you know. And when they're landing on high tide, is when they come in, and they got steel, railroad iron, they look like, with points cut on them with a burning torch, and when the landing craft come in there, it ripped the bottom out of the bottom of the landing craft, and the soldiers all drowned, and the Marines all drowned, not all of them, but a great lot of them, before they even got to land. It ripped the bottom out of the landing craft. Well, it disrupts all kinds of things, you know, and so...
You'd already shot the big guns first. You softened it up.
Yeah.
You'd already shot for a couple days, 2 or 3 days of big guns.
We destroyed the air runways, the airport, the barracks. We destroyed everything it could destroy.
All three of your big battleships just kept shooting from one direction or all three directions? You all around the whole island or just one part of the island?
No, just everywhere there was, the airplanes reported activity.
Yes.
The observation planes would fly over the top and take their pictures, and then they'd come back and tell the command where the enemy is and what they got and where the trucks are and all this, that, and the other, and they give us all designated by certain targets, and then we'd do it, and at night then we'd fire star shells over them all night long, so that people doing the observation could see.
Yes.
And
what kind of observation planes? Was it the planes on the front of your ships? You had those planes, the amphibious planes that would go off the front of your 3 ships, or did you have other planes that came from carriers that did the observation for you?
Well, they do that too, but they can only stay in the air about 3 or 4 hours, but they'd go when you're actually shooting. And they'd know what targets we were looking for.
Which ones? Your amphibious ones on your ship?
Yeah.
Those that you had. Each one of you had 2 amphibious planes.
Yeah.
That would take off, and while you were shooting, you wouldn't shoot them though. They'd stay up high, away from your bullets, right?
Oh yeah, they stay out in a safe area, they call it.
And they take pictures or just report back on radio.
Both. Both. They both. And
but
then you got a radioman, and he's on the air all the time.
Well, in Tarawa, they must have had 2 or 3 places you could have landed, but probably the easiest place to land was where they put all those impediments up out in the water, I guess. The other part of the island wasn't easy to land in, and they knew you were going to land there, but you didn't know they had that in the water, did you?
No. It was hard on the landing crafts.
Was it the Higgins boats or the LSTs, or what did you put in there?
It was Higgins boats.
And it tore the heck out of those Higgins boats.
Yeah, well, see, there's 85 soldiers in one of those Higgins boats.
Or an
all
LPA.
standing up.
Yes.
85. And then the boat would sink. Those people out there and a half a mile from the beach.
And they had all their gear on. They turned upside down with that heavy gear. They just couldn't swim with all that heavy gear.
Well, they drowned.
Yes.
They had all that. Each one of them had 85-pound pack on their back.
Did you see that or not? You didn't see it. You were down below.
You couldn't see it. You could hear them talking about it.
Was it over the horizon? Would you see the island? Because the horizon is 25 miles.
You could see the island.
You could see it when you were attacking it.
Yeah, if you went topside, you could see it,
Because the gun would reach 18 miles, so you were shorter than 18 miles to shoot your guns.
Well, see, actually, the most opportune time for bombardment is about 3 or 4 miles.
3 or 4. It's better. Yeah. You better trajectory, better aim.
Well, you got better accuracy.
Yes.
See, and you got to back out right so with your projectile goes like this.
Yes.
And then when it comes straight down.
Yes.
If you want it to be coming down, go going off in the air, going 150 miles an hour this way, just make a big concussion in the air.
So you really tried to get within 4 or 5 miles of the island when you shot all those big guns, because you were much more accurate.
Ideal if you can.
Yeah.
Now, Sid, what we had in those projectiles, I forgot to tell you. They called them a buck Roger fuse. And it had 2 flashlight batteries, standard flashlight batteries, and the fuse of this projectile. And when it's going through the air, it don't do anything, you know. And then as it starts coming to the earth, like this,
Yes.
trajectory they call it.
Yes.
It gets into its earth trajectory, and about the time that this projectile is going about 100 miles an hour, and when the electric flux around this projectile comes in contact with the ground, the soil,
Yes.
the earth, it explodes. Well, when it explodes, it's maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 feet from the earth. And it's coming down like this. And it showers this shrapnel all over a certain area, just like rain. And if you're in a hole in the ground, you're going to have 3 or 4 holes of shrapnel big as your fist in your back.
Much more lethal than hitting the ground and going up.
That's right.
And I think the atom bombs, didn't they try to do that, have them detonate before they hit the ground?
They did detonate before they hit the ground.
Both of them detonated.
Both of them. And they hit the ground first, then everything goes up this way.
Yes.
You're going down the other way, everything goes this way.
How did they time that? It would be about 200 feet above ground, or how would that battery? They had some type of detonator on there to do that. I don't understand how that worked.
Well, the electric magnetic flux is around this shell from this battery operated fuse.
Yes.
And the earth, it's like direct electricity.
Yes.
If the light bulb won't burn unless you're underground.
Yes.
Well, as soon as the fuse gets aground, it explodes.
Yes.
It's a ground fuse.
Yes.
And the fuse has got a powder charge in it. And maybe 10 pounds of black powder. Well, the atom bomb had a fuse too. And when it comes close to the earth, when they come out of the airplane, they arm it.
Yes.
You know, and that it's when it comes close to the earth, it's going to shower itself over an area of maybe a mile square.
Yes.
We're talking about the atom bomb.
Yeah.
And if you're in that square, it's going to melt you,
Yeah.
or it's going to make you wish you had been melted.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because the pictures that atom bomb has, it looks like people, bricks, steel, concrete, and then various other things all melted together.
You see some old steel
That
structures
damn
from
hot.
Hiroshima.
You melt that steel, right?
Just bent that steel. You had some steel that stood, but not just melted.
Right now.
Yeah.
It's so hot. It's hotter than all blazes. Well, with this other shell, it comes down out of the USS Pennsylvania. It comes down like rain,
Yes.
you know, and it come with a force behind it that would go in the middle of your body before it stopped.
Still lethal.
Sometimes it might go out the back.
Yeah. Still
or
very
out
lethal.
the front.
There's still a lot of momentum that's coming down instead of hitting the ground
and
going up.
And it covers a big area.
Yes.
And if you got 10 or 12 of them coming down, you'd put an airplane operation and out of business. You put that on top of a runway coming down for airplane can't land, it can't take off. You know, and so, but anyhow, Tarawa, she was a bad one, but
Tell me.
then we went on.
No, I'm still on Tarawa. then how did you finally take that island if all those Higgins boats were getting all torn up? Did you finally figure out to get around those obstructions in the water? Because you took Tarawa. You finally took it, but with a lot of troops lost from the boats tearing apart. How did you finally take the island?
Well, the Marines then, they took no prisoners. They killed everybody on the island.
Before you got on the island?
Yeah, well, no, the Marines, when they got on the island, we just softened it up. They went in and they went in and
killed everybody. But they had more losses than you would have thought because of the Higgins boat getting torn up.
These guys all drowned.
Yes.
You know, the reason the loss was so great because so many boats sunk.
Yes. Yes.
And they you know that, but that's the only operation they ever had that program. Yeah. But they and another thing, see, if they had known that they were there, they would have changed the invasion time to higher tide.
And they would have seen that, yes.
Yeah, see, if they'd, but the LSTs and the LCIs and all this and the other, they weren't used on that island because the island didn't have deep enough water. Yes. But after that, we went to that operation lasted a couple of weeks.
Okay, so then that lasted a couple of weeks at Tarawa. It says the Pacific Theater at Tarawa was like November 20th of 1943. Battle of Tarawa, November 20th to 23rd. It was 3 days in World War II. It was in a Pacific campaign. It was all Japanese held island of Betio, B-E-T-I-O, in the Tarawa Atoll of the Gilbert Islands. Heavy resistance there because of what you said. It was a lot of resistance, even more than you would think. Okay, tell me about your next island there that you ended up striking there, Frank.
Well, the next island, best I can remember, was an island called Kwajalein. And it was further south.
Let me tell you the statistics on Tarawa before we leave. American troops, 35,000 American troops engaged there. Japanese had, I think, I don't have the exact number of the Japanese troops, but the casualties, we lost 1,696 Americans. The Japanese lost 4,690. So the Japanese lost 3 times the amount, but we lost more than we would have liked to have lost because of what you're saying about the ships hitting those, they said the Marines were forced to wade to the shore through the coral that was razor sharp and low tide of the constant assault from the Japanese along with sniper fire and caused them to get trapped. Very difficult for the Marines there.
It was.
Okay, your next island, what's the next island that you went to there?
It was an island in the Kwajalein group.
Uh-huh. Go ahead and tell us what you did there.
Same thing.
Uh-huh. Same
thing as before. The big problem on Kwajalein, everyone had a little problem. They had pillboxes, they called them, and bunkers, and they had logs all piled up and made like log air shelters.
Yes.
And then the Japanese would fire through the cracks and what have you in the log. They called them bunkers, or they called them pillboxes. And the Marines had a hard time with them until they got the flamethrowers out, and then people would edge themselves up to those pillboxes and shoot a ball of fire in there and burn them up. And then the Navy had a job, had them all covered up with sand, and the Navy had the job of bombing them and shelling them, and destroying them all they could.
It said here in Kwajalein that we lost that it was a tough island too. It was January 31st of 44 to February 3rd. So it's about 4 days, about this time of the year. We're in February of 2016, but it's about this time that you were there hitting that island. It said they learned a lot of lessons from Tarawa that helped. That they learned a lot more. But then the Japanese had those pillboxes that were a little different that they didn't have at the other place.
The Japs built all those pillboxes with labor that they had took from soldiers that they had captured in Korea.
During the World War II, early in the World War II.
Yeah, before World War II started, the Japs went into Korea and took several thousand prisoners in a short war with Korea. And they took them and made prisoners out of them and built them bases in the South Pacific. We're blowing up.
Tell us how many days you shot your guns at Kwajalein before the troops went in. You softened them up for 2 or 3 days?
Yeah.
And you got about 4 or 5 miles out, just shot and shot and shot, and you would have
Well, we'd have targets. We had, I guess you'd say, well, I guess a better word for them would be spies. The North Koreans, not the North Koreans, the Australians that was left behind from the army, they were beach patrols and what have you in the South Pacific, and they would get information for us, and all that kind of stuff, and they told about all this business that the Japanese had done in all those little islands of atolls. And there was 3 or 4 different islands in that Kwajalein group that we bombed, but I can't recollect the name of those. So it was all prior to Guam and Saipan and Tenya.
So here at Kwajalein, you said at Tarawa we lost about 4,500. Here at Kwajalein, and then we didn't lose it, but the Japanese lost it. Here they lost the same amount. 4,300 were lost in Kwajalein. The Americans only lost 142. Where we lost 1,600 in Tarawa. So at Kwajalein, it says we were smarter. We didn't get anywhere. It wasn't as lethal. We had 10 times less killed. Only 142 were in Tarawa. We had 1,600 men killed, where the Japanese had the same amount killed, about 4,500 and 4,200. So we got smart after Tarawa. So then your next island, we're talking, now we're leaving that island February 3rd of 44. Then you go to another island. What one do you take on next there, Frank? You take on Saipan or Taiwan, or did you take on Guam next?
We took on Saipan next.
Saipan, okay.
Saipan and Tenya. Took them on practically the same time.
When you look at things, those two are very important because they became our gas stops to invade mainland Japan, because the airplanes could make it there and back. So, but these were not easy islands to gain control over, but they're very important. They were before Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima was even a better place to be, but these helped us with our gasoline stops for the airplanes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The planes took off. The runways were big enough at the B-17s and the B-24s. They could take off from Saipan and Tenya.
And it was it was so busy there. It was the biggest gas stop in the Pacific. There were gas stations and everywhere there. I mean, just filling up. Those planes were getting filled left and right.
And see, before that, the Army didn't have any way in the world to get bomb Japan, and the Navy's fighter planes off of carriers wasn't effective enough to withstand the losses that they'd had to stand. So they take Saipan and Tenya. They had two islands. They could have done it with one of them, but they took them both. And those planes could take off from there, and about 7, 8, 10 hours after they took off, they'd be returning.
How many hours?
It seemed to me it was about like 8.
Yes.
Well, but it'd be daylight. They'd take off at daylight, about daylight in the morning, and then they'd be back before sundown.
Now, the Battle of Tinian, it looks like this was then, we're jumping into your life. It was July 24th to August 1st, and it looked like that battle was a pretty bad one. It looked like, it says, 5,000 troops were killed, Japan, and only 326 Americans were killed. Can you tell us how long your ship shelled Tinian before you went in, before you let the troops go in? Did you just shell them for a couple of days again?
About a week.
A week of shelling them.
Yeah, about a week.
Just still your 3 battleships, or did you have more battleships by then?
Well, our group was the same, but the Halsey's group, the fleet of battleships he had all the fast ships, and the fast and big carriers, and we had the slower ships, but Halsey's main job was protect us against the Japanese Navy. If the Japs would have, he hadn't been for him, why the Japs would have come and destroyed us,
So he was able to keep them off of you.
That's right. He had the big mighty mole.
Missouri, which was the newer class. That was the newer class battleship. A little bigger gun, not 14 but 16-inch guns. A little faster, a little everything. The Big Mo was better.
And more of them.
More of everything. They had, instead of 12 guns, they had more guns. Big Mo.
He had more of them. He must have had 20 aircraft carriers, and we didn't have any aircraft carriers because we didn't need them. But and he had 15 or 16 battleships, and I don't know how many cruisers. Maybe a lot of them, maybe 30 or 40, and it had all kind of battle groups and this, that, and the other. The Japanese, whichever way they went, we was outgunned.
So then the Battle of Saipan looks like a little later in time. It looks like June 15th.
Yep.
So about a 10 days or 9 days after D-Day that was happening on over Normandy, you were right there shooting the guns at Taiwan, or at Saipan. You've already taken Tinian. You already took Tinia, and now you're working on Saipan. And Saipan, it was June 15th of 44. That's when you started going after them, it looked like, in that time frame. They lots of heavy Marines reaching shore, 8,000 hitting the shore the first day, but you had to bomb. After you got done with Tinian, then you went up to Saipan, was your second hit, and you sat there and hit them for a week before you let the troops come in. Did you not?
That's right. That was a big one. That was a big operation. Big operation.
Much more shooting there than you had at Tarawa and even the Kwajalein. This not even comparing.
Lot more.
Because you said you're a whole week shooting at them, where the other ones you're just a couple days.
That's right. And you was busy the whole week too.
You never, and did they have to resupply you with ammo, or did you run out of ammo?
No, we'd resupply in that week time. We may take a day and take on more ammunition. We go out to sea a couple 100 miles and meet the ammunition ship,
and then come back in.
So, but we had several battleships in that bunch. They had the Tennessee and the California and Mississippi and the Idaho, and I don't know, there were several of them. Then we had several cruisers. By that time, the Navy was getting bigger and stronger. We wasn't building, they're still building new ships, but we wouldn't get many sunk. And when the first thing, then the aircraft carriers, we had tons of them. And then the next operation, why, we looked at Guam.
But before we get to Guam, we're going to go back to Saipan here. This was an amazing battle. It says there are 15 battleships in that, 15 different battleships, and you're one of them. You were on the USS Pennsylvania, but there are 15 of those. It says a total of 37 warships. It said they fired more than 180,000 shells of various calibers. The largest was 16 inches. Did you send 16 inches, or did you send a little smaller than that?
Well, ours was 14.
14, okay.
But see, the Mighty Mo, she had 16.
So up by 2 inches.
And
But this is how much bigger this battle is. At that battle of Saipan, they killed 24,000 Japanese. 5,000 were suicides, 921 prisoners, and 22,000 civilian deaths. The Allies, lost 3,400 on that battle. So it was like twice the mortality as Tarawa. But we lost a lot of people. The Japanese in Tarawa and Kwajalein, they only lost 4,000. This one they lost, it says 24,000. So they lost 6 times more. So this was a big stronghold for them. They knew it was a stronghold. The people engaged there, 71,000 American troops and 31,000 Japanese engaged in the fighting. It says lots of suicides. It says 22,000 civilians were dead, mostly of suicides. So lots of hara-kiri of not being captured there in Saipan.
oh yeah.
So it was
I'll tell you what they done in Saipan. I saw some of it with my own eyes. Well, I guess it'd be the west side of Saipan, the island of Saipan. There was a big cliff. I'd say it was half a mile long.
because that's where we had our airlift. That's where they put the airstrip there, right by that cliff.
On top of that.
On top of the air cliff, so you could see it from your ship, because you were probably only 5, 8, 10 miles away, but you could see it.
Them Japs marched up there by the hundreds.
And jumped off the cliff.
And jumped off of that cliff into the ocean.
You could see that from your ship?
I saw it with my own eyes.
How far were you out? Did you have binoculars? You didn't need binoculars.
Oh, we was probably with a football field.
And you saw them just jumping off. This is when you had about won the battle. You had troops on the island and you were about killing them all. And you saw that suicide.
It was absolutely.
Not just one person.
Not just one person. They just come up there. They'd be coming over there 10, 15 at a time.
And how far was it down to water? About 50 feet?
It's estimated to be 100 feet.
Yes. And they hit the water and swim, or they hit the...
On low tide. But the water was deep.
Yes.
You know, and the cliff was as straight up as that wall there.
Yes.
You know, and those people up on there, and there was no trees, there wasn't no vegetation. They just march out there in groups of about 2 to dozen maybe. And they, women, kids, and soldiers, and what have you, because they believed it was a big disgrace to be captured. They were told that by their warlords.
Well, here's what it says here. The Japanese, there was 24,000 killed. They said 5,000 were suicides, only 921 prisoners, but it says 22,000 civilians are dead, and they said mostly suicide. So it must have been suicide jumping off that cliff.
That's what it was. That's what it was. And they just bailed off of there by, just...
You never see anything like that in your life, have you?
No, and you never will again either.
Isn't that something?
They jump off, and they have their hands out like this, and their legs out just like that, going right down through the splash, you know.
Hit the water?
You can see the white splash that high.
Yes.
And this big, you say, take a 150-pound rock and throw it out in the ocean.
Yes.
And when it hit, it goes splash.
But these weren't, they probably hit the bottom, or they drowned, one or the other.
Well, they hit in the water.
Yes.
There was no ground between, there was no beach.
No beach, but they hit the water. They could probably swim. They probably got killed on impact.
Well, I imagine it's unconscious when they hit the water, because that's a hell, you go drop 50 feet, and where you hit on pavement or water, it's going to knock hell out of you.
Yeah.
You know, even if you're a good swimmer.
Okay, let's go. and then you left there, and then we went to Guam, right?
Yeah.
That's your next one's Guam. Tell us about the what you did in Guam, and go over what you happened there.
Well, Guam was a civilized looking place, you know. And, but anyway, again, we sheltered for about a week, and the troops, just another carbon copy of Saipan or Teddy or any of the rest of them. It was still bigger than any of the biggest one yet, because there was Guam is a whole lot different part of the country. It looks more like Hawaii.
Yeah, a lot of the Japanese at this time go there for honeymoons. It's about a 7-hour flight to Guam from Japan, even by jet. So Guam's pretty far away from Japan.
Oh, yeah,
so it's
yeah,
3,500 miles about.
It's a whole lot.
And this battle was on July 21st through August 10th. So it's about a 20-day battle at Guam.
Yeah.
Is what happened there. So that's a pretty long battle. But you hit them with the big guns again, softened them up, I guess.
Same thing. They say there was a city on Guam, and I can't remember the name of it. I want to say Angara, but that don't sound right. But anyway, there was a city there, and the Japanese occupied that city, and that was one of their dirty tricks there. There was a hospital there, we thought. It was painted white. It had great big red crosses on it, like similar to a cross that Jesus Christ was crucified on. That type of a cross. And but anyway, had a Japanese flag with a red circle in the middle.
So you didn't bomb that. You didn't bomb that.
No, we didn't bomb it.
And they had troops in there, I guess. But they were.
We say we didn't bomb it. See?
Yes.
Well, it seemed like things wasn't going too well, but the Japanese seemed like they never run out of ammunition. And so anyway, they were talking about their army and their soldiers, you know. So anyway, I don't know what admiral or what general, but one of the admirals, one of the powers to be, decided to bomb the hospital. It has to be where it's coming from. And they bombed the hospital. And that thing was there full of ammunition. It wasn't no hospital. It never was a hospital. It was just a big building that they had full of ammunition. And they bombed it from the air. And it blew sky high.
Did you see it go up?
I didn't see it, but the people on the ship did. Because my station's down below.
Yeah.
And but anyway, it blew sky high. It was no hospital. And anyhow, now the Japanese, of course, they're not dummy. There was a sugar refinery factory right there near the beach, and that was our main point of aim. We'd be so many thousand yards north of the sugar plant stack, or so many thousand yards south, or so many east, so many west, see? And we was using that for a main point of aiming.
Yes.
You know, and that was, without that thing, we'd had another one. And it was kind of a city with rubble.
Yes.
But that was a nice, everything off of that, see?
Yes.
Well, the Japs, they're smart enough, they heard the communications, they blew the damn smokestack up.
Well, themselves. Because they didn't want you using that as a sighting, and they blew it up themselves.
They blew her up themselves, it fell over. They blew the foundation out, see? And it went boom.
So you had a little harder time aiming then. It was harder to aim without it.
Oh yeah, we had a secondary though.
Yeah.
And we switched right over to the secondary, kept on going. But anyway, that's for the retaliation that they gave us for the blowing up their ammunition stack.
This battle there were 3,000 Americans killed in Guam. This is about a 2-week battle, and 18,000 Japanese killed, 1,200 POWs, and Americans had 7,000 wounded. The strength of the Army, the Americans, was 59,000. The strength of the Japanese was 18,000. So we still lost 3,000 people there, which we shouldn't have lost those, but probably that ammunition in that big building caused half of our deaths, I'll bet, because they didn't know that, because they had that.
About it, cause you got to cut off their ammunition supply if you're going to hold your casualties down.
Now, your next one was Philippines, or where'd you go next, Frank?
I think the next one was the Philippines.
Tell me about that a little bit, because that's a pretty important battle there, really important. Leyte Bay, did you go to Leyte?
That was the biggest program you can imagine. We had the admiral aboard our ship at that time.
So he was in charge.
His name, Ohlendorf was his name. And his last name, Ohlendorf. I forgot his first name. But that's when General MacArthur got into the picture with his army at Leyte Island. And we went into Leyte Gulf, and we bombarded the beach for the army, and we was in there for many days. And
but there was a Japanese threat there. They had a Japanese Navy at that time. Did you see? Yeah, and the Japanese Navy was there, and it was a problem for you. It wasn't a cakewalk.
No, sir. But anyway, then the Japanese Air Force, they whipped out their kamikaze airplanes big time there. And we had, I don't know how many warships in the Leyte Gulf, about 60, I think, or more. And
that went October 17th to December of 44. So October, November, December, you're 3 months messing with the battle down there in the Philippines. That's a right. long drawn out battle there.
Oh yeah, that was a big operation. Now on the October the 24th is when we, I never will forget it. It was on October the 24th at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we met the Japanese Navy at the entrance of Saratoga Straits.
Now
the Saratoga Straits is a body of water that's somewhere around 20 miles long, and when it's in I think it's the Sea of China, I believe, but I'm not sure about that name, but I believe it is. It's on the other side, on the west side, I believe, of Leyte Gulf. And we're in Leyte Gulf, and we've been in there 60 days to the day. And then the Japanese finally decided to come in and get us.
In the Leyte Gulf. They came up from the south.
Yeah, and we was in Leyte Gulf.
I'm going to show you a map here so we can go, and I'll let you zoom down on this. This is a map here. I'm going to turn this off for a second so we can study that. Now, this is, Frank's got that pointer, the pin pointed right, the Battle of Leyte Bay. Is that pronounced right?
Yeah, Leyte Gulf.
Leyte Gulf, that's the battle right there. The Japanese, they came up from the south, up to the straits there. The straits of what, Frank? What's those straits?
The Saratoga Straits.
The Saratoga Straits, they came up from the south there, and you were up waiting for them for 2 months.
We sat there for 60-some days.
60 days.
Making a big circle. And Leyte Gulf was about 60 miles wide and about 100 miles long.
Put the pin right on the Leyte Gulf. Down lower.
Whole Gulf area.
Yeah, but down where it shows, we're right there.
Where the battle took place.
Right in there.
Right in this area here.
Where'd you been floating around for 60 days? Right in that same area?
Yeah, right in the Leyte Gulf.
Leyte Gulf.
Leyte Gulf is about 60 miles long and about 40, 45 miles wide.
Why'd you stay there? Why didn't you go somewhere else?
Well, it wasn't needed anywhere else, and the only way our job was to protect the beachhead behind MacArthur's army.
Which way's MacArthur's army? On which side was he? Down south?
They were at the south, but they were going north.
I see. And you wanted to protect him because they were going to come after him.
Because if the Japanese thought that they could land behind MacArthur.
I see. They thought they could land down south.
Have two battlefronts.
So MacArthur's coming up from the south, right? And Japanese are up here anyway. They got it. Japanese got this. And they wanted to get their ships in here and land some people and stop MacArthur. And you were out here in the strait.
To protect the beach.
You were there to protect the beach. And tell us, you sat around there for 2 months in a circle waiting for them. And there's the battleships to the right where your left hand is there. There's all the battleships. Yeah. Now, you had said 20 battleships in Philippines there, but you had 6 battleships where you were.
In this particular spot.
Yes.
The rest of them were out and chasing Japanese ships.
Other places. But you had 6 around there at Leyte Bay. Okay, I'm going to pull this off here. So right there at Leyte Bay now.
Well, the purpose was to protect the beach so that MacArthur could only have one fight, one beachhead to protect and one army to fight. If the Japanese could have landed 100,000 soldiers behind him, they would do what they call the scissor. MacArthur would be between 2 armies instead of 1. And so we protected the beach. Well, when the Japs finally decided they're going to have to make a run for it, when you go start through the straits, you can't turn around. You run the channel of water is too narrow to turn around, but you can go through in a single file, like a row of ducks.
That's the Strait of, what's the name of that strait?
It's the Strait of Saragata.
Strait of Saragata, right here, the Strait of Saragata. So the Japanese are coming up through this strait, single file, and you're up here waiting. Tell us what happened.
Well, at 3 o'clock in the morning.
On the 24th.
On the 24th of October, we opened fire. And by daylight in that morning, there was a single Japanese vessel floating.
How many you think you shot? 2 of them or 10 of them?
20 or 30 of them.
20 or 30. Many battleships in them?
The leading ship was their big pride of the Japanese Navy. I can't pronounce its name. Hirohito, I think, but I'm not positive of that. But anyway...
He was bigger than you. That battleship was bigger than yours.
He was bigger and more powerful than the U.S. Navy's Missouri.
So he had 18-inch guns. Missouri had 16. You had 14-inch guns. So if you went face-to-face with him, he would have beat you if you were the only ship. He would have beat you hands down.
It been hard to get away.
Because you can shoot 18 miles, he can probably shoot 22 miles.
Yeah, or more.
So if battleship, he'd just sit at 22 miles and beat you until he finally got you.
He never fired a shot.
Because why?
Well, the thing is, when he was in the straits, he couldn't turn broadside to shoot. You have to shoot dead ahead. If he had shot dead ahead, he'd have buckled his own plates and sunk himself. And we were broadside, and in a naval warfare, it's the only time in the history of naval warfare that they call that crossing the T. That 2 admirals are going to have a sea battle, and one of them gets in a position where he can't turn around. And he couldn't turn because the channel was too narrow in deep water. He had to have about 40 feet of water in the channel, and a channel of 40 feet of water, but it's only maybe 100 yards wide and 18, 20 miles long. And so they come through there and then in the night cover of darkness, and we had a submarine station at the opposite end of the channel. And when his fleet started through there, our submarine set up his antenna and give us a signal that that they've entered the channel. Well, you could only go about 4 or 5 knots, is because the channel is so treacherous and so narrow. But anyway, at daylight, he thought he could get through there by daylight. Well, we had him tracked all the way, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, why, he was in the right position for us to open fire, and we opened fire at 2 o'clock in the morning, and by daylight in the morning, which was about 5 o'clock, why, the Japanese had very few ships floating, and there's a lot of soldiers in the water, and a lot of them were alive, and we destroyed them. And
did you think your ship shot this major battleship, or you think another?
Well, our ship, unfortunately, never fired a shot.
Because you weren't in the right position?
No, because one of our destroyers got in the wrong position, and it would have been a problem. We could have sunk him, and on the radar screen you couldn't tell him apart, and so we never fired a shot. But the other ships was in a different location. They sunk them all.
Did they come out one at a time, and then was the first one the great big battleship, or was he the last one through?
The big battleship was the first one.
And so did the other ones just come in?
He come on into the Gulf. By the time he got in the Gulf, there was an American destroyer got in the wrong position, and on the radar screen we couldn't tell them apart. And so rather than take a chance on just killing our own people and sinking our own ship, he's caught anyway. Daylight come, why, a crack of dawn come, why we finished him off in a hurry.
So you could distinguish it once it got light, and you just waited till it got a little lighter, and then everybody opened up.
And the American destroyer wasn't in the wrong position by ignorance. They had an engine breakdown of some kind, and they had lost their power, and they didn't have any electricity. They lost everything.
So they couldn't communicate.
They couldn't move even.
How many ships coming through that straits then? If the first one was a big battleship, and then a bunch of others came in.
They had troop transports loaded with 100,000 or more Japanese soldiers.
Wow.
And they were intended to land those soldiers on the beach at Leyte Island.
Yes.
And then MacArthur had to shot them one at a time.
Yeah.
But MacArthur, he's in his army, is up the 40 miles away afoot.
Yeah.
And so the Navy stopped them where they got stopped because we didn't allow any of the soldiers to get to the beach.
You think those soldiers swam to the beach, though, some of them?
Huh?
Some of those soldiers probably swam to the beach.
Well, we had people there shooting them.
Did you? On the beach?
No, the Navy had the ships there, and they shot them.
I see.
And they pumped oil and gasoline on the water and set that on fire, and they're swimming in it.
I see.
And they wouldn't even got ashore.
None of them.
None of them. Yeah. None of them. MacArthur sent maybe 500 soldiers down there to snipe them, and they never fired a shot.
Did the airplanes do much in this battle, or was it mostly ships?
It was all airplanes didn't participate because it was before daylight, and at the crack of dawn in the morning, and
a pure naval battle.
They couldn't. They had plenty of people handle them without hollering for help.
Now, how out all those maybe 15 Japanese ships, half of them were troop ships, which really didn't have much armor on them, but they had 1 or 2 battleships, didn't they?
They had the cruisers, they had destroyers, but when it was all over, it was all into the water. They sunk them all.
Did any of the cruisers or other ships injure your ships at all? Did you have a lot of injuries in your ships?
None.
None.
We never had an injury in one.
Was this I mean, out of all naval battles in history, this is one of the biggest, is it not?
It is the biggest one because the enemy was in a position that they could not return fire. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. And it wasn't, by sundown that night, the water was pretty red. The stream.
Why didn't Japanese do that? That wasn't smart of them to get through that.
They were desperate. They were desperate.
They did.
They waited something like a month
to go up to do something
to get somewhere where they could defend themselves.
Yes.
But they knew what was in this channel. They knew if you started in it, you couldn't turn around.
Yeah.
And they knew that if we were going to set them out, if we was in a position we could have set till Christmas if we had to.
Yes.
But so they decided to make a run for it. Yeah. Well, that was just shortening the war that much more.
Yes.
Because then after that battle was over, we went up to the northern Philippines in a place called Luzon, and then with the Army, we didn't have much work to do up there. The Army didn't have any resistance ashore, and then by that time, the Japanese thought they had to talk surrender. They started dropping the atom bomb. That moved them around, and then we went to Okinawa.
Okay, before we get to Okinawa, about 24,000 American deaths in the Battle of the Philippines. So there's lots of different battles there. It went on for a long time, but Battle of the Philippines was not easy. We lost 24,000 troops in Iwo Jima. We lost 24,000 troops in the Philippines, and we lost 24,000 in the battle you're going to talk about, Okinawa. So we were still having lots of losses. The Americans only lost 450,000 troops in World War II, and here in the last 2 or 3 months, we're losing a lot. Battle of the Bulge was one of the worst losses of American troops.
That's right. It was a tough one.
But this one, we're losing too many troops for Truman to be happy with all these losses. It's just terrible for a mother to have her child lost, and your mother would have been terribly distraught if she'd have lost you during this. So here we lost 24,000 every time we're turning around. Now, let me have that book here. Let me have that book, Frank. And then then we left to Luzon. Then you went up to tell us about.
Yeah, we lost a lot of people, and there's no doubt about it. You know, that's a lot of people, no doubt. But the thing is, that's a share out of about like 1 million people.
Yes.
You know, there was 1 million American servicemen over there. Yes. It's a pretty small percentage.
Yes.
And but anyhow, that was the big. After that, the Japanese started having thoughts about surrendering, and when the atom bomb come along, the next summer, which was August, I think, why they gave it up.
Well, then after you left there, then the Philippines, in the Battle of the Philippines, it looks like where we're just leaving now, 22,500 Americans killed, and 146,000 Japanese, total casualties, 146,000. It sounds like 25,000 Japanese killed, 21,000 wounded, and 100,000 captured. So, the troop strength was about equal, 121,000 Americans, 151,000 troops of the Japanese. So we ended up winning there, but it was lots of death and lots of other problems to win that battle. But this is one of the most historical battles that you just talked about, the Leyte at the straits there, and you were right there as a witness. Unbelievable war battle where you talk about the T, where they couldn't shoot from the front of their ships because they were paralyzed by the straits, and also they're only 5 miles an hour was nothing, where you could go a lot faster, and they were sitting ducks.
That's right.
Now
they were handicapped, and in the history of naval warfare, That is the only time that they've ever what they call crossed the T.
Nobody else ever let them get in that position, did they?
No, they wouldn't have got their position due if they had decided to go through the Gulf. But if they wanted to get into the battle, that's the only way they could get there.
They were just so desperate, They didn't have anything left. They were.
And if they'd have tried to go around, the American Air Force would have sunk them anyway.
Yeah.
But the only reason they waited them out, if they wanted to take the Guadalcanal, we could take the Saratoga Strait route. Why, we had plenty of ships to guard the entrance, the exit, and we had a submarine guarding the entrance to it. And he wasn't there to sink anybody. He was there to tell us when they started in. Therefore, we'd know when they was coming out.
Yes.
Because I believe it was 18 miles long. Yeah. But I'm not sure of that, about the distance through there. But I know that they started in there about 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, in the evening. And about 6 o'clock in the morning, a crack of dawn, they was coming out. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, well, this American destroyer had engine problems, and our position, why we best don't fire because we had plenty of firepower. They never missed us, but we were there. And we had the admiral aboard our ship. That made us in command.
Yes.
His name was Ollendorf.
Ollendorf is written in the books. Ollendorf is ahead of that, wasn't he?
Ollendorf. He got his first name in there?
It has Ollendorf. Yeah, Ollendorf has in this. Yeah, Ollendorf was pretty important in the war, and he was on your ship. You were calling the shots there.
Yeah, and he was a man in charge. He was, of course, the person in charge of him. His operating, that was a guy named Halsey. And then there was another one, of course, there was another one named Spruce.
Spruance class ships too, Spruance.
And then Chester Nimitz was in charge of the whole Pacific Ocean.
Whole Pacific. They got a lot of things named after him.
Yeah.
So let's now move to Okinawa. I think the invasion of Okinawa was April 1st or Easter Sunday, and then ended in June 23rd of 45. But I think Easter Sunday, FDR died on April 12th of 1945, about 12 days after that war started in Okinawa. But tell us what you did. This didn't start till another little bit of time afterwards. Okinawa War, you left the Philippines and you went up to Okinawa. And the invasion of Okinawa is the biggest amphibious invasion in the war, bigger than actually Normandy, even though you see Normandy on the sites all the time. Yeah. But it's an atoll over there.
Okinawa was something different.
It's an atoll.
Let me tell you what happened to us. We come back to San Francisco.
After the Philippines,
to get new guns. Our guns had been fired so much that the liners were cracking. And so...
just your ship or Mississippi and Idaho too?
No, just our ship.
Just the Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Now
so you left the Philippines. This was that battle was in October, November. So you left there and went all the way back across the ocean.
That's right. Now, after
by yourself, or was there other ships with you?
After the Philippine island job was over,
yes.
Then we came back to San Francisco, and we got new guns in San Francisco.
How long did it take them to put them on there? A week or two?
No, a month.
A month.
We was there a month.
Yes.
Okay.
What month were you there? December?
No. Let me think.
Did you get some R&R, get out in San Francisco? You get a goof off a little bit or not?
No, we never went anywhere. We people wanted emergency leave and wanted leaves. Well, they got leaves, but I stayed on the ship.
Yes.
I didn't come home. I'm trying to think here. Anyway, we got our new guns, and we was there most of the winter.
Yes.
Okay, and in the middle of the summer, I mean, we got pretty much our overhauls. What we got.
Yeah.
And us and the Indianapolis
took off.
Huh?
The Indianapolis had the H-bomb on it too.
Yeah, well, we did too.
Oh my! Give us that story.
We didn't have.
Not the H-bomb, the A-bomb.
Yeah, A-bomb. Now, I'm going to tell you what we had there. The Indianapolis had half of it, and we had half of it. But we didn't know it, and neither did they. That was the best secret this country ever had. And we left Pearl Harbor with the Indianapolis. I mean, left San Francisco with the Indianapolis. And
is the Indianapolis same type of
it was
ship?
A cruiser.
It was a cruiser, and you were
it's half as big as, but they're a lot faster.
I see.
A cruiser
go 25.
Our top speed was 20 knots. A cruiser go 35, 40.
Yes.
And they carry 8-inch guns, and they're real maneuverable, and they're narrow, and they're hard to hit.
Yes.
You know, and you got battleships, you got cruisers, and you got destroyers, and you got carriers. Yeah. Each one of them is part of the fleet. But anyway, we leave San Francisco.
Just two of you.
The two of us, and two destroyers.
Okay.
You always have destroyers for the one of submarines.
Okay.
Because the destroyers carry sonar equipment. Battleships don't. Neither do carriers or cruisers. The reason they don't carry, their engines are so powerful that the sonar then don't operate right. But a destroyer can cut his speed down to about 12 or 14 knots. And the sonar works perfect. And the beam will be transferred from the destroyer out through the water, all around you, maybe a half a mile. And if nothing's out there, it's clear. Okay, now then, the operator's got a set of earphones. If that beam hits a steel ship underwater, it will go ping, 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 ping. And then, so you get yourself closer to the ping. And you get so close that you can hear a guy walking with hard soles on his shoes on the sub. The sub cuts, if they know there's a ship got them in their sonar, they can tell. And they'll, if they can, they'll sit down on the bottom of the water and shut everything off. And they can't tell you them from a rock.
And sonar can't pick that up.
They can't pick you up.
Yeah.
But if you get up and walk and go to the toilet, they can pick that up. And maybe, if everything's perfect. But anyhow, we're going to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Okay, we stopped at Hawaii. We got the atom bomb on the quarterdeck. And
you had half an atom bomb. You had big boy or little boy, or you don't know. Did you have big boy or little boy, or you don't know? You had fat boy or little boy.
We don't know what we had.
Yeah, but you had some on the quarterdeck in a big box, and you didn't know what it was.
And it was all marked
top secret.
Top secret radar equipment.
And it was on your foredeck. You could see it. It was so big you didn't put it anywhere, but it was on your foredeck, on the front of your ship.
It was on the deck.
On the deck.
In these wooden boxes. It's on top side. All anchored down.
And the Indianapolis had something too.
She had half of it. We had half of it. That is according to the boxes.
Yes.
Now the boxes, might have some of them been empty. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I saw it, and they had 4 or 5 Marine guards on that. Armed guards.
And you never saw that before on any package. They didn't need to guard that radar, did they?
It said top secret radar equipment repairs. That's what it said. Well, we got to Saipan then, and they took the atom bomb equipment off
of
us and the Indianapolis.
And put it where?
And they put it on the beach. That's where they put it on the airplanes. No, at Pearl Harbor, we just got fuel.
Yes.
Refueled again, and then we went there. We got to Saipan. They took it off and put it on the beach, and we got underway, and our ship, and was headed to
Okinawa.
Okinawa.
Yes.
That's where we were going.
Yes.
And that's where we went. And the Indianapolis
Go to the Philippines.
went to the Philippines to a Leyte Island, Leyte Gulf.
Yes.
Okay.
But then they got hit somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. On its way down there, it had no destroyer with it. It was by itself.
And it shouldn't have been.
It was. It was by itself, and it should not have been.
Yeah.
But the admirals got so cocky. There was a war was over, pretty nearly on this, that, and the other, and the captain could have waited till the next day before he went to the Philippines, Leyte Gulf.
With a destroyer.
He would have had a destroyer with him.
Yes.
The Indianapolis would.
Yes.
You know, but he couldn't wait. Now he had a hard on for a waitress that was working at the
Lady.
Leyte Island where the army was, you know, and he couldn't hold it another day.
Yeah.
So he got underway anyway.
Yeah.
They told him zigzag, the admiral did, according to Plan 9.
Did they do it or not? Did they zigzag?
When he left, he zigzagged till dark that night.
And then went straight.
Then he went straight, and he upped the speed to 25 knots.
That's pretty fast for that. Yeah.
Why full flank speed?
Yeah.
Boop boop. You know, and okay. Now then, this Japanese submarine on a moonlight night was submerged. Now this goddamn Jap submarine never fired a torpedo in the whole war. The captain, he never could find an American ship, you know, but he found that one. It was a moonlight night, and they're going straight. They're not zigzagging. And goddamn, it was about midnight, and he got a torpedo off, and by God, hit it, and it was at the second one off, hit it again, and sunk it, you know, and that was all there was to it. Now, if that son of a bitch would have waited, or if he would have zigzagged, I bet he wouldn't even be here today. And but anyway, that's a big loss.
And those guys were stuck in the ocean. Nobody knew they were down for a while. They were trapped. There's a lot of survivors of that. They were trapped for quite a while out in the ocean. They were stuck out there.
Well,
nobody knew they were there.
Yeah, well, they knew they were there. Somebody did, you know. But let me tell you what they see. They wasn't sure.
Yes.
But the Indianapolis, this captain they had, failed to report his right departure. And according to the people in the Philippines that was running the transportation show, didn't have the word that the Indianapolis was underway, because he didn't tell them. He was too hurried to get to that goddamn woman.
Yes.
Well, anyway, so the Japs had a bad habit of listening to our distress calls, and they might have been listening to that one, but what they were doing, the Japs were, if they thought you were a distress call, they was one thing, but they were putting in distress calls as if they were Americans. Mm-hmm. And then we'd send a rescue outfit out there and hunt for them. Then they'd sink the rescue outfit.
Yes.
It was like bait.
Yes.
You know, that's the kind of warfare they liked, that kind of stuff. And but anyhow, the Indianapolis got sunk, and now then, the meantime, why, the war is about over.
But you're on the way to Okinawa with a destroyer.
The destroyer, he's on his way going to Leyte Gulf. You know,
the
cruiser.
The cruiser was, but you left him at Saipan, and you're on the way to Okinawa to help with the invasion of mainland Japan or Okinawa.
We went to Okinawa.
Was the battle over then? It was already over, not yet. It was in June then, or?
Yeah, the Okinawa battle was all over.
Yes.
Okay, we're sitting in Okinawa.
Yeah.
Just sitting.
In the bay or in the ocean around it.
In Buckner Bay.
Buckner Bay. That's okay. Buckner, that's where I was stationed. That's Buckner, yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's where we were sitting. Well, the war is over. You know, now, while we were sitting there, the Japanese came down and landed their plane on the American Air Force Base at Okinawa with 4 or 5 planes, at least 4, and they were painted snow white, and they had green crosses on both sides of the fuselage, on the top of the wing and on the bottom of the wing and on the tail, and they were not a cross; they were a plus. Yeah. Like that, you know, and it was hauling their peace treaty people, their military and their who all run to Japan, you know, it was on them 2 planes.
Yes.
Okay, I saw with my own eyes. Our ship was anchored in the Buckner Bay, and they got out of their white planes and got into American transport planes, camouflaged American Army green, I call it, and they flew them to, Americans flew them to the Philippines where MacArthur was. And he set up his headquarters in Manila, and the airports at Manila. Well, they hammered out the peace treaty, you know, and so then here they come back and they land their military American plane.
A week later?
About a week.
Yeah, and you saw that again, landing again.
The same, and they transferred their equipment and their briefcases and what have you.
To the white plane.
10 of them back into the Japanese plane. They took off, went back to Japan.
You can see that from Butler Bay.
Yeah, I see it from the ship. I see them all the time. Yeah, the plane was sitting, 100 yards.
Yes.
And the airport was a little bit higher in the ocean. See?
Yes.
And they land and they get in there and this, that, and the other, and they go through their salutes and their handshakes. And away they go.
Yes.
Okay. Now then, they decide that the war is over, and I forgot what day it was in August now.
August 6th and August 9th, the atom bomb, but I don't know what day we really signed the peace treaty.
Well, it was in early August.
Yes.
You know, after the atom bomb, of course.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it was the 7th of August. Well, I'm on being a guy named Ace Leyte was on a gun director as a battle station and security. He always got people on the guns, and they changed the watch at 8 o'clock at night. It was about dark there, and here come the guy done relieved me. Because I was trigger happy. Well, I would have shot the son of a bitch. That's all there was to it. I would never fool around. But anyway, this plane come flying in, and the word had come that day that there will be no American planes flying until so many hours. No fly zone.
Yes.
You know. Well, here comes an American-made plane flying. You know, well, the people that was on the guns didn't shoot him down. Lo and behold, that was an American plane with a Japanese pilot flying a American torpedo. It was a torpedo plane, a TBF, and he dropped that goddamn torpedo in Buckner Bay, and that torpedo blowed a hole in us and killed 54 people. And it was a Japanese pilot flying an American plane. And this plane had crashed on an island in the South Pacific, somewhere near there. I forgot what island. And he was disabled. And the plane that crashed there earlier, rather than crash in the water, the pilot crashed there, and I'm almost sure that the pilot was dead on the crash.
And then they salvaged the plane.
And this goddamn Japanese figured out how to fly this plane. He was a pilot, but his airplanes are all been he bypassed. You know, I forgot what island, but he was flying this American plane. He dropped that torpedo that hit us, and the night fighters from Okinawa took after him, and they shot him down. 5 minutes later, and he crashed in the water, and the plane didn't sink, and for a while, and they was able to put pontoons on it and keep it from sinking, and that's what had happened. And this Jap here was on an island, and he didn't know the war was over.
Oh, didn't even know.
He didn't have any communications.
Nothing. Nobody told him. Yeah.
Well, he didn't have no communications. See.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened to us. Well, the Indianapolis, they ended up getting sunk, and the people was in the water 4 or 5 days, and the Americans knew they were getting their communications, but they failed to send rescue outfits because the Japanese they didn't report this pilot. Not pilot, but the captain didn't return in his position.
Yes.
You know, he's supposed to have reported what his position was a half hour before he got hit. Well, goddamn it, they knew he was overdue, but then where? Where are you going to look? The ocean's big.
Now, after this Okinawa, did you go up to sign the treaty in Tokyo Bay? Were you there when it was signed, or were you up? Or are you still at the end of the war when they signed the peace treaty on Big Mole? Were you up there, or where were you?
No.
Because you got hit. Your ship got hit.
We got hit. So
what part of the ship was hit? The center or the back?
It hit right square in the stern and blew all 4 propellers off.
All 4 propellers.
Off.
And you didn't sink, though. Didn't sink.
No, yeah, it sunk. But the ground, the bottom of the Buckner Bay wasn't deep enough for it to sink.
So you only went down about 20 feet. 10 feet. And did they salvage the Pennsylvania then?
Oh, hell yes.
Well, how'd they salvage it?
Well, let me tell you what they done.
You got 1 minute, because I'm running out of tape here or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what they done. They put a patch over the hole.
Yes.
You know, underwater cruise. Yeah. And we towed the ship from Okinawa to Guam.
Wow.
Between 2 Navy tugboats. And we got in that most terrible hurricane that the Pacific Ocean has ever known. And in 24 hours, we, according to shooting at the stars, when the clouds would give away enough they could get the stars, we made 1 mile. And we had 2 Navy tugs going full speed into the wind. Well, our speed indicator on the ship only went for 125 miles per hour, and I laid on the peg for 2 days. And
that's the worst part of your trip, wasn't it?
Oh, it was rough.
Because you were dead in the water, and those things are with 2 tugs, big. Oh, that was very difficult because Okinawa or Guam is 7 hours by plane.
Well, that was terrible, and I can tell you. And they got us to Guam, and they put another patch on us, put 2 screws on us, and the war's over now, see? And so they're going to bring the ship back to Seattle, which they did. And we brought it from Guam to Seattle. It took 3 weeks. And
at 4 miles an hour.
Only the best we could do was 9.
9.
And then we had trouble about halfway, and the diver, well, every ship got a couple of Navy divers. He had to go over the side